Welcome to another episode of the Heartland Author Podcast. I'm Aaron Apollo Camp. For today's episode, I had the honor of interviewing Stephen Murray, a self-published author who currently resides in Las Vegas, Nevada. Stephen has authored 5 self-published works of fiction: The Chapel of Eternal Love, Return to the Chapel of Eternal Love, Murder Aboard the Queen Elizabeth II, Discreetly Yours, and Discovering the Christmas Spirit. I'm here with Stephen Murray, who is an author of several books. Stephen, welcome to the Heartland Author Podcast.
Thank you, Aaron. Thanks for inviting me on your show, and thank your listeners for tuning in.
For my first question, feel free to introduce yourself to the listeners of this podcast.
Sure. My name, as Aaron mentioned, is Stephen Murray. I live in Las Vegas, Nevada. I was born in England, but I grew up in Southern Africa. But I have spent the last 40-some years of my life here in California, and for the last 18 years in Las Vegas. I have run a computer software company for almost 40 years. And more recently, I've started writing books and have 5 published novels, self-published novels, I might add.
Okay, what do you like most about living in Las Vegas, Nevada?
Moved here from California. We moved the business here. I like it, not because of the gambling, because I don't even gamble, but I like the variety. I think it's a creative vortex, Aaron. There's a lot of creativity here, and it's reflected. There's over 100 authors that live here. There's a lot of artists that live here. You just have to look at the shows and the variety of restaurants and food. It's got everything. You know, it's got the arts, it's got the dining, it's got the shows. And to me, it still has that small town feeling. The people are very warm and friendly. That surprised me more than anything when I moved here. I don't know why, but it did. I just feel very comfortable here. I like it very much.
Okay, what are the titles and genres of each of your books?
Well, the first 2 books that got published, they're mainstream fiction. The first one is called The Chapel of Eternal Love. Wedding stories from Las Vegas, and it's about a fictional Las Vegas wedding chapel. The reader gets to spend a day at the wedding chapel, and you meet all the couples as they come and go, and their stories as to why they've come to Las Vegas to get married and why they've fallen in love. It's not a romance book, but it is a book about love. And I wanted to write it to show the other side of Las Vegas. We are known as Sin City, but we are also the marriage capital of the world. So it's a strange dichotomy. And even though the work was fiction, readers want to know what happened to all the couples in the first book. So the second book is called Return to the Chapel of Eternal Love, and it revisits all the couples in the first book 5 years down the road and where their lives have taken them. The third book that came out is a cozy murder mystery. There's no graphic sex or graphic violence or expletives. For that matter, there isn't in any of my books. But that is a murder. It's called Murder Aboard the Queen Elizabeth II, and it takes place obviously aboard the luxury liner. It's about a very wealthy Beverly Hills couple celebrating their silver wedding anniversary. And they take their friends and family on the QE2 to celebrate. And as the ship comes back from England to New York, one of the party gets killed and the murder has to be solved before the ship docks in New York. Otherwise the party scatter. The fourth book is called Discreetly Yours. It's a crime fiction book. Again, it's a cozy crime fiction. No graphic sex or violence. It's about 3 escorts. They work for the most exclusive escort agency in Las Vegas. The guy that runs the agency treats them like dirt, so they come up with a perfect crime to get rid of him. But is it the perfect crime? Do they actually get away with it, or have they overlooked one tiny little detail that brings the whole lot crashing down? So that's the fourth book. And the fifth one just came out at the end of October. And it's a very warm, fuzzy Christmas book, and it's called Discovering the Christmas Spirit. And it's about 5 individuals. They're on their way traveling to Cody for Christmas. And they're in a helicopter, and the helicopter crashes outside of this tiny little village called Christmas Carol Village, and they're stranded there for Christmas, and the 5 have personal issues to deal with, but their lives are changed by living in this village for the 4 or 5 days of Christmas, and the response they get from all these villagers, they're just warm, friendly folk, and they do what they can to make their guests stay in the village more than welcome, and their lives are changed by being in this village, and it's how their lives are changed. So that's the fifth one that's just been released.
Since you answered both my third and fourth questions with your response to the third one, I'll skip ahead to the fifth question. Are all of your books self-published? Are all of your books traditionally published? Or are some of your books self-published and others traditionally published?
They are all self-published, Aaron. I went the self-publishing route on every one of them.
Okay, next question. Did you outline before writing all or some of your books? Because there are some authors who prefer outlining, and then there are some authors that are called pantsers that don't outline before writing a book.
I do outline in my mind. I do outline the book in my mind. I figure out how I want it to end, and then I figure out how it's going to start, and a very broad outline of the direction it's going to take to get from start to finish. I have to confess, I am amazed at how much that outline changes, that the actual journey from start to finish actually changes as I'm writing the book and the characters get developed. I surprise myself sometimes as the development of the characters take the book in a different direction, even though it's still... I don't know if that's answered your question.
That last few seconds of what you were saying, your microphone kind of dropped out.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was saying that that from start to finish, I do plan the start and the end. Also, I have a brief outlook of how the book should be, the journey to get from start to finish, but sometimes the character development switches that journey, which surprises me, but it still lands up with the same finish.
Okay, if you've already kind of answered this question, that's okay, but if not, what is your typical writing routine, if you have one?
I'm not one of these people, Aaron, that wakes up in the middle of the night with an inspiration and dashes to the computer. Typically, I try to write a chapter to my book each week if I can. During the week, as I'm traveling to the supermarket or the bank or wherever I happen to be going in the car, if I'm by myself, I'm formulating the next chapter, the dialogue of the next chapter, who the main characters are going to be, if there's going to be multiple characters, so on and so forth. I try and formulate it, and then I will spend the Saturday afternoon, if possible, and actually putting it out on paper. Then the following week, I also try and then refine it in the computer while I'm formulating the following chapter. I'm kind of forced into a routine to an extent because I belong to a writer's critique group that meets every 2 weeks. And every 2 weeks, you have to present something that you have written. So there's no escaping getting something down on paper on a regular basis, for me anyway.
Being a member of a writing critique group is one good way to develop a consistent writing routine.
It also has other advantages, Aaron, because um, when I write, I can't speak to other authors, but I think I've made things crystal clear. And when I present to the critique group, they'll suddenly come up with, well, what about this? You didn't quite make this very clear. And you suddenly realize some of the very key details and important things that you've left out. So um, I've been in my critique group now since I started writing, which is about 9 or 10 years ago, and very important. And if there are any potential new authors listening to this program, Aaron, I would strongly recommend they find a critique group to join, because their feedback and input is absolutely invaluable, or I've found it extremely invaluable.
I'm going to pivot more to from writing to reading for this next question. What books from authors other than yourself do you like reading? This can be books from a specific author or books of a particular genre.
You know, I don't get as much chance to read as I would like. My favorite author has always been Charles Dickens. I just love his style of writing. I love the development of his characters. You just have to think of the name Ebenezer Scrooge, and it automatically conjures up the picture of somebody very miserly. Um, I just love his style. I love his books. Some of them are a little bit heavy, of course. The subject matter that he writes about, for the main part, tends to be on the heavy side. But I do enjoy his books. I enjoyed reading them certainly when I was at school. As an adult, I don't necessarily have a favorite author per se, but I do like to read a lot of current affairs books. I like to read opinion and commentary books from various authors, get different perspective on what's going on in the world, and certainly in America, and what's going on in our world. So I like to read a lot of current affairs books. And I do enjoy various biographies when people come out, especially autobiographies. I prefer it if it's about people who are still living and they're writing their own stories, as opposed to biographies written by other people, especially if they're posthumously written, where the person can't answer.
One last question. Do you plan on writing more books?
Yes, I do. I've just, as I mentioned, I've just finished the Christmas novel. I haven't finally decided what I'm going to start writing next, Aaron. It will be a work of fiction, that I can say with certainty. But I haven't formulated in my mind exactly what it's going to be. I've got three concepts. I'm just trying to figure out which one of them will have legs and which one of them I can actually develop into a fully fledged story. But I will start writing in the new year. Typically, it came out in 2013, the second one in 15, the third one in 17, the fourth one in 19, and my fifth one in 21. So it appears that it's every 2 years a book does actually come out. So hopefully I will have something out in 2023.
Well, I'm out of questions for this interview, so Stephen Murray, thank you for appearing on the Heartland Author Podcast, and I wish you well in writing your next book.
I thank you very much for that, Aaron, and thank you for inviting me on your show. It's been an absolute pleasure. I apologize if I answered a couple of your questions in one of my answers. That wasn't my intent.
That's
But I have
okay.
enjoyed chatting with you.
I'll sometimes write write down more questions than I end up needing for an interview. So that's okay.
Well, I certainly enjoyed my time with you, Aaron, and I wish you a very happy holiday season and all the very best with your podcast and going forward.
I wish you a safe and happy holiday season as well. Thank you for appearing on this podcast.
It's been my pleasure. Stay safe.
I enjoyed interviewing Stephen Murray, and I will include links to his website as well as links to where you can buy each of his books on Amazon in the episode description. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write your imagination. Bye for now. You can learn more about me and my book writing projects at authoraac.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter at authoraac. You can also watch videos on the Heartland Author channel on YouTube. Copyright 2021, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of its audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.